Okay, so let's get started. Welcome everyone to this presentation on economics programs at University of Durham. My name is Leslie Reinhorn. I'm a lecturer in the economics department. All right, so I'm going to get going here. So I'll be talking a little bit about the university as a whole, but the predominant focus is going to be on the programs that we have on offer in economics, so the modules, the structure of the programs, and so on. Okay, so to get us into the economics mode of thinking, a definition of economics, and a slide later on some sort of topical issues in economics. So I've taken this definition from John Maynard Keynes, a very famous economist from the first half of the 1900s. So the economic problem, as one may call it for short, the problem of want and poverty and the economic struggle between classes and nations. So the issue that he is emphasizing there is that there's not enough stuff that people want, and how is it that they're going to get the stuff that they want, who ends up with it, who doesn't, and so on. So if there was plenty enough stuff for everyone, we would not have economic issues to worry about, and so the fundamental thing that we deal with in economics is scarcity. And that can apply not just to money. So most people decide that they don't have enough money, it's scarce. But lots of other things as well, including time. Okay, so for instance, people deciding how to allocate their time between different tasks, between various pleasurable tasks and other things that will earn them some income, that potentially is an economics problem. On a UCAS application form, you're only allowed to apply to a finite number of choices. That's a scarce resource. So deciding which places you're going to apply to is potentially an economic problem as well. Okay, so some issues, current and otherwise, again, to kind of get us in the mood. So top one there, which is very much in the news at present, what is causing inflation and what can be done about it? Okay, so more or less everybody has a kind of, if you read newspapers, a basic idea that, if there's too much demand for goods and services at the current prices, relative to the supply of goods and services at those prices, that's going to push the prices up. There's going to be some inflation. But of course, that anybody can state that. That's a task, though, of trying to understand in more detail what are the fundamental causes. Because if you know that in very general sense, but you don't know in more detail, then you can't do the second part of this and try to figure out what to do to control it. So being able to analyze something like this in detail, and in economics, we will tend to use mathematical models to try to make things as precise as possible and to get to the point where things are amenable to statistical analysis. Okay, so inflation. Second one, should the government pay the cost of all undergraduate tuition fees? That is an issue in public economics. What should the government do? Policy-related issues. And obviously with many public policy issues, different people have different views. People in this room will probably all say, yes, the government should be paying for all of it. People who have just finished their degrees and didn't get as much subsidy as they would have liked to get will be having a very different view because they might not want to subsidize the next people because they didn't get as much. So different people have different views. Being able to study that in public economics, again, trying to be able to use models to formalize these issues is something that we do. Third one, what are the economic consequences of Brexit? That comes predominantly within the field of international economics. So we'll have modules available that deal with issues in international economics. It's that can be issues that are related to the economy as a whole, as well as issues related to firms. So an individual firm deciding whether or not to export to a particular country may be worried about, will the conditions, the bilateral trade conditions between the UK now as, on its own with this other trading partner, what's going to happen to those conditions in the future. Would an increase in the living wage have a significant effect on the level of employment? So a naive approach would assume that anything that's going to raise the wages that firms have to pay would then cause them to hire fewer workers. Turns out that's not always true. So being able to formalize this sort of an issue with an economic model and then bring it to the data can sometimes bring surprising answers. Second to last one, is the UK government's debt sustainable? So the big number there as to what it is at present, latest released data. And, that's a huge number if you divide it out by the number of people in the country. comes out to almost 40,000 pounds for every man, woman, and child in the country. So it's a lot. And one can ask the question of, if you think about carrying an extra burden of 40,000 pounds, and if it's a family of four, 160,000 pounds almost, is that that level sustainable? Is further growth in it sustainable? So it's a macroeconomics issue. It's one that requires the study of fiscal policy within macroeconomics. Last one, why is rental accommodation in London so much more expensive than Durham? Well, it's so that we can have a selling point for encouraging you to come here. Okay, so some of these points about why choose Durham are about the university as a whole, and some of them are getting more specific about the Department of Economics. So the degree programs I'm going to go through in quite a bit of detail. The BA Economics degree program, L100, and a little bit about some of the other programs that we have on offer. But give you enough information, you have hopefully by the time you leave, you'll have a pretty good idea of the design of that program. So optional modules. So some students have different interests as to what they want to do, in terms of subfields of economics. So we have a range of optional modules available. You need to understand the core economic theory first, but once you get to the final year of the program, there's going to be a lot of options that students can choose from. A vibrant research-led department. So most of the people who will be teaching you at university not only teach but also do research as well. So for instance, my field of research is optimal taxation theory, which is primarily in public economics but also in macroeconomics as well. And there's a lot of complementarity between research and teaching. So when you go to university, you're not just accumulating knowledge. You're doing that, yes, but in addition to that, also learning some skills that will be useful for you in the job market. So skills like being able to solve problems and think analytically, and that's where the research side comes in. Excellent teaching and facilities. So I have lots of great things to say about the facilities here, except air conditioning is one thing that we haven't quite got enough of. But we have the university is continually upgrading its teaching facilities, IT facilities, and so on. Good career prospects. I'll say a little bit about that towards the end, as well as the second to last point there about postgraduate studies. And the final thing, a challenging and stimulating learning environment. There's more to university life than just getting a degree. So ideally, you'll be lifelong learners by the time you leave here. So a little bit about that. So some nice pictures there of some of the colleges. If you haven't yet had a chance to see one of the colleges, I would recommend that you do so during your visit here. So not sure. I thought that the number of colleges was 16, but is it 17? 17 colleges. So, there's a huge number of students in total. When you divide that by 17, it's a much more manageable number. So a college may have, say, 400 students coming in each year, 400, maybe 500 at the most. That's quite a few, but it's much less than the entire size of the incoming class. So more personal relationships within the colleges. Unlike Oxford and Cambridge, the teaching all occurs within the academic departments, not within the colleges. Okay, so within our Department of Economics, it's quite a large department, about 40 members of staff. 1 year ago at this time, we were actually a combined Department of Economics and Finance. It was like 80 people. It was a very, very large department. So a more manageable number, but still quite large. And we're part of the business school, which not only includes the finance department, but also the management department and the accounting department. So there are, synergies between these various different subject areas within business, and you'll have the opportunity. I'm going to emphasize in the presentation, you'll have the opportunity to take at least one finance module each year in the program. Independently recognized excellence in teaching and research. The symbols down there are accreditation agencies that have looked at our research and degree programs and have accredited us. So we are under review. Pretty much every year there's one of these agencies that comes by the business school. So in response to what they have to sell to us, we continually upgrade our programs. So again, a year ago, if you'd gone to this presentation, there would have been some things different in terms of the degree program. So things do change in response to suggestions from students as well as outside reviewers. Facilities, again, strong international links. So a few of my colleagues are native British. So I'm Canadian originally. I've been a citizen of the UK, dual citizenship since 2005. So I've been here a while. And I've mentioned colleagues from, I wouldn't quite say every continent. I don't think we have anybody from South America right now, but we did in the past. So, I have colleagues from many, many different countries. I'll say a little bit about opportunities for doing a year abroad. But, even aside from that, if you want to, perhaps pursue a job in another country or work in a multinational, again, we have people that have connections with a wide range of different countries, and that resource is potentially available to you. Okay, so these are the degree programs that are managed by the Department of Economics. There are, in addition to these, the programs with study abroad and the programs with a placement year. So I haven't listed those ones as well. But these are the ones, the 3-year degree programs that we manage. There's a separate presentation for PPEs. I'm not going to talk about that. The program that has an "and" with it is essentially 50% of economics and 50% of politics. The 2 degree programs that have a "with" in the statement, in the title, roughly 2/3 economics and 1/3 of the other part. Okay, so I will say something about the economics with management because these first 4 here has typically is going to have the most number of students other than the straight BA economics. People often ask, why are these things called BA degrees rather than BSc degrees? And it's just historical. They've always been BA degrees. So over the years, I mentioned things change, we upgrade in our program in response to feedback. So over the years, the programs have become more quantitative. There's a more mathematical content, more statistical content, programming data usage, and so on and so forth. So we could very well call these things BSc degrees. But again, they've always been BA, and who knows how long they will continue to be BA. Okay, so one other degree that is not managed by our department, but if you are very mathematically inclined, you may very well want to choose this natural sciences program where there's a route in which you can do economics and mathematics. Okay, so back to the programs that we manage here in the economics department, the entry threshold A-star, AA at A level. Okay, so if you are predicted below that, it's unlikely that you're going to get an offer. There may be exceptional circumstances, but in general, you're going to have to get predicteds of A-star, AA, or above. In addition, university across the board does not include general studies, or does not include critical thinking within those A-level packages. Economics, you must have mathematics within that A-star, AA. Economics with French, small program, but nonetheless that might be of interest to you. You would have to get an A or A-star in French as well. Here's an equivalent for the International Baccalaureate. You may be taking other qualifications, Scottish Advanced Hires, whatever it might happen to be. If you go to the university's web pages, they will tell you what are the, for those other types of entry qualifications, what are the equivalents to what we've got here. So we do have a fair number that do the IB. I actually did many, many years ago. So 38 points is the threshold. You have to get 6s or 7s in your higher level subjects. The mathematics requirement does allow you to do mathematics at standard level, but you'd have to get a 7 in that case. So I'll say a bit more about mathematics as it comes in the modules that we have on offer. Okay, so the way things are organized here, typically students will take 6 modules, each of which runs across the whole year. That's not true in every department at the university, but for economics, that's predominantly how it is. The management department, so if people do the economics with management degree, the management department has shifted more towards semesterization. Okay, so there may be a bit of juggling between these full year modules and some of the semesterized modules. Nonetheless, the university's university-wide coordinated exam period only occurs in the May-June towards the end of the academic year. So if there are some modules that are semesterized, they will either have their exam at the end of the academic year, or they'll be assessed with coursework. Okay, so that's perhaps more detail than you want to hear, but things are not entirely, there's 6 modules per year. Okay, so some of them are core that you must take, and others are the options, and I'm going to go through the list of all of them. If you want to, these slides should be available somewhere on the Open Day site, so if you want to download them, you can get these links. Okay, so the first year of the straight economics, pure economics, the L100 degree. So there are 3 core required modules, and then that would leave 3 options. Okay, so the required modules, the principles of economics module is macroeconomics and microeconomics combined. Macroeconomics is the economy as a whole, things like inflation, the real growth rate of the economy, things like that, unemployment rate and so on, exchange rates. Microeconomics is individual decision making. So all of it is combined together in this principles module, but it's the core theory at an introductory level. Economic methods is mathematics and statistics for economics. Okay, so you must have this A-level mathematics requirement to get into the program, but on top of that, you're going to have to take this methods module in the first year. So economics, whether we like it or not, it's a highly quantitative discipline. So it's about measuring things, how much, how many, and so on and so forth. And to be able to do that, we need to have mathematics. Okay, so things build up. So as you start the degree program, there's going to be a lot of use of, thinking about analysis in terms of, say, drawing diagrams. As you progress through the degree program, there's going to be more and more mathematics. So you're going to need this methods module. World economy is an applications module. Okay, so effectively it's issues in international economics at a fairly introductory level. But it's, again, so you don't get just this pure onslaught of theory and mathematics. You get this applied module as well. And in terms of options, I should mention, so things may change in the future. So things do change year to year. So I'm telling you what our programs are at present. So people who do the economics with management, they have the same first 2 modules from the previous slide, so the general introduction to economics and the quantitative module, as well as 2 modules from the management department, leaving then just 2 electives. So this is the list of options, electives that we have available for our first year economics students. Again, the list would be a bit different for people doing each of the other degree programs. So economics with management would have a slightly different list, and economics with French and so on and so forth. So too many lists, I'll just present this one for the L100 degree. So economics with sustainability is basically environmental economics at an introductory level. Okay, so if that happens to be something of interest to you, there's an option that you can take. And again, beyond the level of just sort of what you'd read in a newspaper. So the advantage of taking a formal academic university module on this topic is that you'll start being able to think about things, sort of in the way that academics, scientists would approach these topics. Foundations of finance. So every year there's going to be a finance module. This is the one for the first year in the program. Introduction to the history of economic thought. So, for instance, if you want to learn a little about Adam Smith, the founder of modern economics, or Karl Marx, or any of the other deep thinkers in the field of economics, that's what this module is about. Instead of just learning the stuff that they derive, their results, you learn a little bit about the people themselves. Mastering data and computation is a new module that's being offered this coming academic year. And so it'll be, by the time you arrive, it would have gone through that first iteration. It'll be a nice, well-developed. So the guys who are going to be freshers this coming autumn, they're going to be the guinea pigs. You would have it after it's gone through that first rendition. So this is taking the stuff that you learn in the statistics module, economic methods, and putting it to the data. So particular areas of economics that are of interest would be chosen for this module and actually analyze them with data. So a very hands-on module. You learn some programming skills as well. And a foreign language module. So some students choose to take a foreign language. You can take 2 over the program. So if you happen to be interested in Italian, you can take an Italian module, twice during the degree program. So you'll see this bullet point showing up as options available in the second year and the third year as well. When you get to year 2, macroeconomics and microeconomics, the core theory, they're 2 separate modules, so a lot of depth, making sure that you have the background that you're going to need, to become an economics graduate, to be able to write a dissertation in economics as well. Econometrics, that's the statistical side. In the first year, you had that economic methods module that was mathematics and statistics. Now you don't see a mathematics module. It's going to be one of the options in the second year, but the statistics is required. So the econometrics module of learning how to analyze economic data. And for those doing economics with management, they would have all 3 of those previous core modules, as well as 2 more from the management department. So leaving them with very little choice for options. It's just one optional module. Okay, so the optional modules when you get to the second year. So the previous group, the 930 group, I did this as well. I'm going to start at the bottom and go up. So we've got the language module again, which one can do. The next 2 here from the bottom going up, microeconomic applications and macroeconomic applications. So they're the theory modules that are core. And these applications modules could deal with policy issues. It will typically be teachers' interest. So what we've had in the past is, things can vary from year to year, but 4 people teaching on each of these modules, so each of them having about 5 weeks, 20 weeks over the course of the academic year, each of them having 5 weeks to talk about a topic that is of particular interest to them. Okay, so again, there's this interaction between teaching and research. The people teaching it will typically, not always, but will typically choose to lecture on a topic that is related to their research. So it's something where they're applying the methods and techniques of economics to something that is of interest. Going up, intermediate economic methods, that's the mathematics option for the second year. So at this point, we allow students who have more mathematical interest and who want to take this module, they can do so. Those who do not want to, don't have to. Corporate finance, there's our finance elective in the second year, and at the very top, behavioral and experimental economics. I'll say a bit about this because these 2 areas of economics put together in this one module, both of which are relatively new. So if there's some parents in the room who did an economics degree program, they may or may not have seen a bit of behavioral economics and experimental economics. So I'll do the experimental first. So one does not think of economics as being an experimental science. So it's very difficult to do experiments, say the government deciding which policy should we use. Oh, I don't know, let's do this policy for the northern part of the country and this other policy for the southern part of the country, and let's just see what happens. So natural experiments are very difficult to do in economics, but we can do experiments in computer labs. So asking people various questions and trying to get their responses and trying to incentivize them to give us honest answers. So experimental economics it actually started quite a while ago, but it has flourished in the past 20 or so years, and it's now part of this module. Behavioral economics relaxes the assumption that people make decisions purely rationally. So historically, economic analysis, you have to make some assumption about how people make decisions. How do people decide what to buy, how they're going to respond to tax rates, various things like that. So you have to make some sort of a behavioral assumption. Typically, we've assumed that people are rational, they pursue self-interest, and they don't make mistakes. So behavioral economics relaxes those assumptions. So one would obviously want to relax those assumptions. It can be very difficult, and advances have been made in that over the last number of years, introduced in this module. The final year. Okay, so there's only one core required module, but it's a double module. So 1/3 of the work that you do will be a dissertation in the final year. It's 12,000 words. So yeah, think of that now. That's a lot. When I supervise students and they come towards the point where they have to submit their dissertation, most of them are trying to cut it down to 12,000 words. So we help you along the way, give you the background and theory and the statistical analysis of economic data. You get to choose whatever topic you want for your dissertation. You'll choose something that interests you, that motivates you. And so most students find it very easy to fill the 12,000 words because, again, they've chosen the topic on their own, and they have the background at that point to be able to do the work. Economics with management, there's one additional module that has to be taken from the management department. And then we've got 2 slides worth of optional modules in the final year. So again, you've got the core theory down. You're now, by the final year, in a position where you can apply what you've learned and take it further in a number of different subfields of economics. So the first 3 there are primarily, though not exclusively, there for the students who want to go on to do a master's degree. So if they want to get additional theory in macroeconomics and or microeconomics and or learning more about econometrics, how to analyze economic data at a more advanced level, those 3 modules are available. Development economics is studying why are some countries so much more wealthy than other countries. So the difference in standards of living between Western industrialized countries versus some of the poorest developing countries in the world is enormous, and one would like to understand why has that changed for some countries over time, and why have other countries stagnated. Okay, so that can be studied at the aggregate macroeconomic level. It can also be studied at a more microeconomic level of trying to figure out, say within a particular village or something like that, what types of policies can be used to try to improve the efficiency in the allocation of resources. So can having small lending programs available, can that make improvements in efficiency? This is where I emphasized before about the second year experimental and behavioral economics module. The experimental stuff is typically done in computer labs, but some experimental work can be done in the field. Okay, so some of the results in development economics are based on field experiments at the micro level. Environmental economics and policy, we have the first year option in sustainability. This is obviously going to be more advanced, but it essentially takes that further. Game theory and applications is strategy applied formally to economics. So the idea of game theory, it's been around quite a while. The first major breakthroughs were in the 1950s, but it took quite a while for it to really make its way into the economic curriculum and sort of being in widespread use throughout economics. So strategy meaning that when I make a decision, I have to try to think about what decisions you're making as well. It's very clear in some industries where there's only a small number of firms. Say, typical example is automobile producers. There's only a relatively small number of them. Each one, and they sell lots of product. Each one of them has got to think about what their competitors are doing if they want to be able to sell their cars at a competitive price in a competitive environment. But it's much more widespread than that. So those are typical examples. But one can even apply game theory in public economics. So the government, trying to figure out what it should do in terms of setting policy, has to try to figure out how people are going to respond to those policies. And that actually is game theory as well. So it has lots of applications, and it's one of the options available. Heterodox economics deals with things beyond the market, purely market-based approach to economics. So Karl Marx would appear in that and other types of alternative approaches to economic systems. Industrial organization, so I mentioned about automobile producers, so that's a very concentrated industry, a relatively small number of firms that are very large. There are other industries where there are lots and lots of tiny firms, and one would kind of like to understand what are the differences between those types of industries, and that's what industrial organization deals with. Okay, so that can also be related to policy issues as well. So if an industry is really highly concentrated, we've had talk about some issues associated with high tech. Should the government intervene in these highly concentrated industries and try to promote more competition? That could also be addressed in an industrial organization module. International economics, so I mentioned in the first year there's the world economy module, and then here we have this optional module, international economics, in the final year. Like development, so international can be studied at both the macro level and the micro level. So exchange rates, for instance, would be a macro level topic in international, where it's trying to figure out why some firms export and other firms don't. It would be a micro issue that could come up there. Labor economics, supply and demand in labor markets, what determines wages, what determines employment levels, what determines, some sectors growing in terms of labor supply and demand, others shrinking. There's all sorts of issues that one can study within labor economics, and of course very pertinent to people who will be going out on the job market after they complete their degree. Monetary economics, I had mentioned inflation at the very beginning, so that would be a topic within monetary economics. But it's broader than that. It can also study policy issues, potentially a little bit about banking sector within the study of monetary economics as well. Public economics, I mentioned at various points along the way, but we have this optional module in the final year, which to some extent there's a teacher's choice element to that because it is such a large field. Lots of different topics. The people who are teaching it decide which areas within public economics they're going to focus on. This last group of 4 modules here that's set aside, students are only allowed to take 2 from this section here based on our current policy regulations. So here we've got the finance modules. There's a module from the business management department and foreign language again. So again, lots of options in the final year, but again, the core required part of the final year of the program is the dissertation. So in lectures at the top. So in the first year of the program, 2 hours of lectures per week in each module. So there's 10 teaching weeks in the first term before the Christmas break. There's 10 teaching weeks when you come back and before the Easter break. And then there may be some revision lectures in the final term after the Easter break before exams. But okay, so 2 hours per week would mean 40 lecture hours and perhaps some revision as well. And lectures can be very large. So this room holds about 200 people. First year lectures in the principles of economics and economic methods will typically be in, you couldn't fit everybody in this room. So they have to be in the large lecture rooms in the center of the university. But then the classes, so these are much smaller groups, typically about 20 students or so. So that's where the personal interaction occurs between module tutor and the students. And as well, there's the possibility then for more interaction amongst the students themselves. So you may have group projects you work on that would be done in the classes. So there's other terms here. So the actual terminology can vary from module to module, but the point is that these are much smaller groups. And number of hours. So for each module, you'll typically get 4 hours in each term. 5 in some cases, but typically 4 hours so after the first couple of weeks, then every other week for each of the modules that you take. The guideline is 200 hours of work per module. Okay, so out of the 6 modules that you do, so that leaves a lot of time then for individual study. So students are expected to take, I'll say something about resources available. You can take advantage of the library resources that are available, do reading on your own. We, of course, give you guidance. You're going to get, for each module, a handbook that will tell you what we expect you to read, what work we expect you to do in terms of homework. But nobody is going to be there looking over your shoulder. These are, it's the work that you have to do on your own. So, formative assessment. So this is work that is required of you within each module. You'll be given some feedback, a mark for it, but it does not count towards the mark that you actually get on your transcript. Okay, so formative assessment is for feedback. Whereas, summative assessment, you get a mark for that, and it is going to show up on your transcript. Okay, so different modules will have different weightings between the exam weight and the determination of the mark in a module versus assignments, essays, projects, data analysis projects, whatever it might happen to be. Okay, so the weighting can vary from module to module, but there must be some formative assessment in each module. You're either going to get some combination of exam and summative assignments. So I mentioned, I've got it here. So exams this past academic year, we finally got back to having some exams being in person and invigilated, whereas during the COVID period, all of the exams were online. So what that will be in the years to come, I don't know for sure, but we can expect, at least for a little while, there's going to be some mix between online exams and the invigilated in-person exams. The dissertation, I've mentioned that 1/3 of the final year. It's assessed entirely in terms of the 12,000 word document that's submitted. Okay, so feedback that because you get these limited numbers of hours interacting directly with the people who are teaching you, we've got to make sure that there are mechanisms in place to getting some information back from us on how well you're progressing. So every module does have this formative assessment, but also within the small group sessions, where you're meeting every other week with your the tutor that you have for that particular module. There can be mechanisms to get feedback there. Either you ask questions to be able to kind of find out where you're at within the module. There may be some group assignments where you're getting some feedback from the module tutor as well. You can come and see us. Okay, so everybody who's teaching will have regular office hours that we're there to answer your questions. But as with other things, I'm going to emphasize that you have to take the initiative. So we're going to tell you when we're available. We've implemented over this past academic year that we have office hours both in person as well as online. So if you're not comfortable coming to our office, you can contact us, through Zoom or whatever we're using, and ask us questions. But it's up to you to take that initiative. Written and oral feedback, and this last thing about academic advisors. So everybody is going to have an academic advisor who in principle is with them throughout their 3 years on the program, or 4 years if you do a year abroad or a placement. So in principle, some people will leave the university, but otherwise you'll have this academic advisor throughout your time. So my academic advisees this year are in their final year. So about resources, so we tell you, give you suggestions of what to read and give you projects and assignments to work on. The university has, through its library, a wide range of academic resources available. Okay, so, and in addition, computer software available, data sets available for empirical work. So we have this thing called Blackboard Ultra, which is what we use to make available to students all of the information that we're providing to them, like lecture notes and assignments and so on and so forth. So it's very convenient. For each module, you have one place to go to where everything is located. In addition, the lectures are recorded. So previous group had people asking, is stuff online or is it actually in person? So the lectures are in person, but nonetheless, they are recorded. So this thing actually is a camera. So there's equipment in all of the lecture rooms to record, and students, if they want to, could choose not to attend the lectures and just watch the videos, but we strongly encourage students to actually attend lectures. So we see a correlation between the students' engagement in the academic program and actually attending things and the outcome at the end as to how well they do. Consultation hours, I've mentioned that, feedback. So amongst these various support mechanisms that what I haven't mentioned before are the year tutors. So when your cohort arrives, there will be a year tutor. One member of academic staff will be the year tutor for that group, and who will then carry on as the year tutor for second year the following year, and third year the year after. So I mentioned that I've got a group of students for whom I'm the academic advisor. I'm also the year tutor for the current group of second year students. So, to emphasize this stuff, is that we do have these support mechanisms in place, and that's kind of balanced off against this idea that you have to, take initiative. You're transitioning from being a school student to being where eventually you're going to have a job and have to be independent. So the first year modules do not count at all towards the degree classification. Second year modules count 40%, and the final year modules count 60%. Okay, so the increase in weighting towards the final year is because typically students do their best work in the final year. And it's been this way for quite a while. You notice at the top this is quite dated, but then once we got to the 2020, that was disrupted by COVID. And this current year, the first year that we've had where the COVID disruption is kind of getting into the past. So we had our Board of Examiners meeting yesterday. That's not enough time to give you the updated information. But this is going to be ballpark of where we're at. So the big red section over there tells you that almost about 60% of the students are getting upper second class degrees when they leave. And again, it's for economics programs, economics with economics. And then 30% are getting first class degrees, and that leaves about 10% or so that are getting lower than an upper second class degree. So employers typically are looking for upper, second class, or first. So predominantly that's what our students are leaving with. There's going to be a small percentage of students who don't achieve. That's sort of inevitable. But we do get, pretty close. So some information about what students do after they leave us. So the biggest chunk, the very top, students taking a full-time job after they leave university. And then in the middle you see students who are doing some amount of further study after they leave. So either they're going on to a degree program at the master's level, or they may be doing something that combines further study with a job. And various other things as well. So this is based on survey information from students who have graduated. Not everybody responds, so one has to take that into consideration. We're looking not just at this, but also if you go to, so here at the top is some information you can find at the Discover Uni website. That information also is based on, students who respond to surveys. So when you make comparisons of numbers like this across universities, you have to keep that in mind. Not everybody responds to those surveys. So nonetheless, indication here of the types of careers that students go on to. So the biggest chunk there is not actually economics jobs, but finance and related jobs. So because economics gives you this wide range of skills that can help you, deal with resource allocation problems more generally. Therefore, it's not just purely economics jobs you're going to be qualified for, but a wide range of different types of jobs. You can see going down here in quite a range of different fields. So just, this is a very small summary of the types of firms that students end up working at when they leave. So one example from the public sector, but indeed, some people end up working at the Treasury and so on as well. Capital Economics is a small consulting firm. So not everybody ends up working at giant multinational corporations. And we've got tech, again, this idea that economics gives you skills that can be useful in other fields as well. So some of these very large tech firms actually hire chief economists. So I don't know why Google would have a chief economist, but they do. Accounting firms, consulting firms, investment banks, commercial banks. So students end up working at a wide range of different types of employers. So for the students who go on to do further study, this can be other things mentioned here, but we do have a fair number of students who go on to do master's degrees, and some are very successful as well. So I'm quite proud. I had a student who did his undergraduate dissertation under my supervision a number of years ago. He did extremely well. He went on to do a master's degree, but he could have gone anywhere. So he ended up choosing to go to Oxford. He did his MPhil at Oxford, stayed on to do a PhD at Oxford, just recently completed his PhD, and he's actually going to stay in the UK. He's a Chinese student. He's going to stay in the UK as first job working at a UK university. So I sort of feel like an academic father in that case. So opportunities are available to you, but it's up to you to take advantage of them. Some students do 4-year degrees. You can apply to a 3-year degree program and then change your mind and do a 4-year program. You can apply to a 4-year degree program and then change your mind and go to a 3-year degree program. So the placement year would be where you do 2 years of study here, and then you go and you work for a firm for the 3rd year, and then you come back for the final year. So you'd be graduating with a different cohort than you started with. And the same thing with the year abroad. So there's an email address for placements done by the business school. In addition, there's apparently someone available at the Teaching and Learning Center. So on the main street, big teaching building. So if you want to talk to them about that. And then there's the year abroad. So if you want to, in the 3rd year of the program, study at one of our exchange universities, that's another option that's available to you. Email address, again, Business for Business School. So, and some pictures of various places that people have gone to. So a list of universities where exchanges are available, and then finally If you want to ask further questions, there's a form that you can fill in to ask questions.